The emergency session at the Department of Homeland Security headquarters had been called with less than 2 hours' notice, sending shockwaves through the intelligence community as senior officials scrambled to understand why Attorney General Pam Bondi had requested an immediate classified briefing with the nation's top Homeland Security leadership. The massive conference room, normally reserved for post-disaster coordination meetings, now housed the most senior national security officials in America, each carrying the highest security clearances and years of experience dealing with threats to the homeland. Secretary of Homeland Security Robert Martinez sat at the head of the polished conference table, flanked by Deputy Secretary Lisa Chen, Customs and Border Protection Commissioner James Rodriguez, Immigration and Customs Enforcement Director Sarah Thompson, Transportation Security Administration Administrator Michael Harrison, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency Director Patricia Williams, and Federal Emergency Management Agency Administrator David Anderson. The assembled officials represented decades of combined experience in protecting America from foreign threats, but none had anticipated the revelation they were about to receive. Attorney General Pam Bondi entered the secure conference room at precisely 10 a.m. on February 16, 2025, carrying a classified intelligence briefing that would fundamentally change how America's Homeland Security apparatus understood and responded to foreign threats. Her expression was grave, reflecting the weight of intelligence that had kept her awake for the past 48 hours as her teams worked around the clock to verify and analyze the most sophisticated foreign infiltration operation ever discovered on American soil. "Ladies and gentlemen," Bondi began, her voice cutting through the tension in the room like a blade, "what I'm about to share with you represents the most serious threat to American Homeland Security since the September 11th attacks. Over the past 72 hours, our intelligence agencies have uncovered evidence of Iranian sleeper cells operating throughout the United States that have been systematically preparing to execute coordinated attacks on our most critical infrastructure systems." She activated the room's secure display system, revealing a comprehensive intelligence analysis that painted a terrifying picture of Iranian infiltration across the American homeland. The main screen showed a map of the United States covered with red dots, each representing a confirmed or suspected Iranian operative who had been living and working in America for years, building authentic identities while preparing for what intelligence analysts were calling the most sophisticated foreign attack ever planned against the United States. "These are not recent arrivals or temporary visitors conducting routine espionage," Bondi continued, pointing to specific locations on the map. "We are dealing with highly trained Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps operatives who have been embedded in American society for periods ranging from 7 to 20 years. They have established genuine careers, formed real relationships, and integrated themselves so completely into American communities that they have been virtually invisible to our traditional counterintelligence methods." Secretary Martinez leaned forward, studying the intelligence displays with growing alarm. "Madam Attorney General, how many operatives are we talking about, and how did they manage to establish such extensive networks without triggering our security protocols?" Secretary Martinez, "Our current confirmed count is 147 Iranian operatives spread across 23 states, with the highest concentrations in major metropolitan areas and regions with critical infrastructure facilities. But that number continues to grow as our investigation expands." Bondi clicked to the next slide, revealing detailed operational analysis. As for how they avoided detection, the Iranian intelligence services invested enormous resources in creating what they call generational cover, operatives who were inserted into American society with the specific mission of building authentic American lives over decades. The photographs on the screen showed ordinary Americans going about their daily lives, a father coaching his son's little league team in Ohio, a woman volunteering at a food bank in Oregon, a man serving as a volunteer firefighter in Texas. Each image represented years of careful planning by Iranian intelligence to create the perfect cover identities for operatives whose ultimate mission was to destroy American infrastructure from within. Deputy Secretary Chen had been reviewing classified personnel files on her secure tablet. "Madam Attorney General, I'm looking at background checks for some of these individuals, and they show completely clean records. College degrees from American universities, steady employment histories, community involvement, even security clearances for some working in sensitive industries." "How is this possible?" Deputy Secretary Chen, that's exactly what makes this operation so unprecedented and so dangerous, Bondi replied. The Iranian intelligence services didn't just create false identities, they created entire false life histories. Some of these operatives entered the United States as children with their families, attended American schools, graduated from American universities, and built genuine careers in their chosen fields. They are, for all practical purposes, authentic Americans with deep knowledge of our society, our vulnerabilities, and our critical systems. She moved to a different section of the briefing, showing detailed analysis of Iranian operational planning. What makes this threat particularly alarming is that these sleeper cells have been systematically positioned within America's most vulnerable infrastructure sectors. We have identified Iranian operatives working in power generation facilities, water treatment plants, telecommunications companies, transportation systems, and financial institutions across the country. TSA Administrator Harrison studied the intelligence reports with the practiced eye of someone who had spent his career protecting American transportation systems. Madam Attorney General, what's our assessment of their immediate capabilities? Are we looking at potential attacks that could be executed within days, or is this more of a long-term strategic threat? Bondi's expression grew even more serious. Administrator Harrison, based on our latest communications intercepts and behavioral analysis, we believe these sleeper cells are in the final activation phase. Our intelligence suggests they could execute coordinated attacks within the next 24 to 48 hours. The room fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. The assembled officials represented the most experienced Homeland Security professionals in America, and each understood the devastating potential of coordinated infrastructure attacks executed by operatives who had spent decades studying American vulnerabilities. CISA Director Williams had been analyzing cybersecurity implications on her secure workstation. Madam Attorney General, our preliminary assessment indicates that Iranian operatives have gained access to supervisory control and data acquisition systems for multiple critical infrastructure sectors. If they coordinate their attacks effectively, they could potentially create cascading failures across interconnected systems nationwide. Director Williams, that aligns perfectly with our operational analysis, Bondi confirmed. The Iranian strategy appears to be focused on what intelligence analysts are calling systemic paralysis, simultaneous attacks designed to overwhelm American response capabilities and create maximum psychological impact on the population. She clicked to a classified section of the briefing that revealed the true scope of Iranian planning. What makes this threat even more serious is intelligence indicating that these sleeper cells have been coordinating with other hostile foreign actors. We have evidence of communication between Iranian operatives and assets linked to Chinese intelligence services, Russian military intelligence, and North Korean cyber warfare units. The possibility of coordinated attacks by multiple adversaries sent a chill through the room. ICE Director Thompson had been studying immigration records for the identified operatives. Madam Attorney General, I'm seeing individuals who entered the United States through legitimate immigration channels, some even becoming naturalized American citizens. How do we address the legal complexities of moving against operatives who may technically be American citizens? Director Thompson, that's one of the most challenging aspects of this operation, Bondi acknowledged. However, our legal analysis indicates that individuals who entered the United States under false pretenses for the purpose of conducting hostile intelligence operations can be treated as enemy combatants, regardless of their technical citizenship status. We have clear authority, under both domestic and international law, to take whatever action is necessary to protect American lives and infrastructure. She moved to another section of the briefing, showing detailed profiles of key Iranian operatives and their potential capabilities. Let me give you some specific examples of what we're dealing with. In Houston, we've identified Mahmoud Hassan, who has worked as a senior engineer at a major petrochemical facility for 12 years. He has access to systems that could potentially disrupt energy production for the entire Gulf Coast region. The profile showed a man in his 40s with a wife and 2 children, active in his local mosque and community organizations, with no criminal record and an exemplary work history. Hassan appears to be a model American citizen and valued employee, but our intelligence indicates he has been systematically mapping vulnerabilities in chemical processing systems and coordinating with other operatives to maximize potential damage from coordinated attacks. She continued with additional examples that painted an increasingly alarming picture. In Phoenix, we have Fatima al-Rashid, who has worked for the city's water management department for 8 years and has access to systems serving over 4 million people. In Denver, Ahmed Karimi has been employed by a major telecommunications company for 10 years and has administrative access to fiber optic networks that carry critical government and military communications. Each profile represented years of patient planning by Iranian intelligence services to position their operatives for maximum impact. The sleeper cells had been designed to blend seamlessly into American society while maintaining the capability to execute devastating attacks when activated. FEMA Administrator Anderson had been studying disaster response protocols for multiple simultaneous infrastructure failures. Madam Attorney General, if these operatives succeed in executing coordinated attacks on the scale you're describing, we could be looking at a national emergency that exceeds our response capabilities. Simultaneous failures of power, water, communications, and transportation systems could affect tens of millions of Americans. Administrator Anderson, that's exactly why we need to act decisively and immediately, Bondi replied. The Iranian operatives have spent decades preparing for this moment, positioning themselves to create maximum chaos and destruction, but they've made one critical miscalculation. They've underestimated American resolve and our capability to respond to threats against the homeland. She activated the final section of her briefing, revealing a comprehensive counter-operation strategy that would mobilize American homeland security resources on an unprecedented scale. I'm implementing Operation Patriot Shield, the most extensive domestic security operation in American history. We will simultaneously neutralize all identified Iranian sleeper cells while implementing enhanced protection protocols for critical infrastructure nationwide. The operation would require coordination between every major federal agency, state and local law enforcement, National Guard units, and private sector partners. Phase 1 involves immediate surveillance and containment of all identified operatives. Phase 2 executes simultaneous arrests across all target locations within a coordinated 60-minute window. Phase 3 implements emergency security protocols for all critical infrastructure systems. Secretary Martinez studied the operational timeline with growing concern. Madam Attorney General, an operation of this scope will require resources and coordination on a scale we've never attempted. Are we confident we can execute simultaneous actions across 23 states without compromising operational security? Secretary Martinez, I won't pretend this will be easy, Bondi admitted, but we have no choice. If we allow these Iranian sleeper cells to execute their attack plan, we could be looking at infrastructure damage that takes months or years to repair, economic losses in the trillions of dollars, and potentially thousands of American casualties. She paused, allowing the gravity of the situation to sink in before continuing. The Iranian regime has spent over 2 decades planning this operation, positioning their most skilled operatives throughout our society with the goal of demonstrating that America cannot protect its own homeland. They believe that successful attacks on our infrastructure will create panic, undermine confidence in our government, and potentially trigger social and political instability that could fundamentally weaken American power globally. CBP Commissioner Rodriguez had been analyzing border security implications of the Iranian operation. Madam Attorney General, what's our assessment of additional operatives who may still be entering the country? Are we looking at ongoing infiltration efforts? Commissioner Rodriguez, we have intelligence suggesting that Iranian operatives continue to attempt entry through both legal and illegal border crossings. We're coordinating with your Border Patrol agents to implement enhanced screening procedures for individuals from Iran and countries with significant Iranian intelligence presence. The briefing continued for another 90 minutes as officials refined operational details and coordination protocols. Each department head received specific assignments for their role in Operation Patriot Shield, understanding that they were participating in what could be the most critical homeland security operation in American history. As the meeting concluded, Secretary Martinez addressed the assembled officials. Ladies and gentlemen, Attorney General Bondi has just revealed a threat that challenges everything we thought we knew about protecting the American homeland. Iranian sleeper cells have been operating in our communities for years, preparing to attack the very foundations of our society. He looked around the room at each senior official. Over the next 48 hours, we will be executing the most complex and critical operation any of us have ever been involved in. The safety and security of the American people depends on our success. As the officials dispersed to begin implementing the massive counter-operation, Attorney General Pam Bondi remained behind to coordinate final preparations with her senior staff. The revelation of Iranian sleeper cells had shocked even the most experienced Homeland Security professionals, but it had also galvanized American resolve to defend the homeland against this unprecedented threat. Standing in the secure conference room, surrounded by intelligence reports and operational plans, Bondi reflected on the path that had brought America to this moment. The Iranian regime had spent decades planning this operation, believing they could successfully attack American infrastructure and undermine American society from within, but they had underestimated the strength and determination of the American people and their leaders. The sleeper cells had been revealed, their plans had been uncovered, and now American Homeland Security forces were mobilizing to defend the nation with overwhelming force and absolute determination. The Iranian operatives had lived among Americans for years, studying their vulnerabilities and preparing for this moment of attack. But they had also witnessed American resilience, American innovation, and American resolve. They were about to discover that attacking the American homeland would provoke a response that would demonstrate why the United States remained the world's most powerful and determined nation. Operation Patriot Shield would launch within 24 hours, marking the beginning of the most comprehensive defense of American infrastructure since the Cold War. Attorney General Pam Bondi was ready to lead that defense, knowing that the safety of every American family depended on the success of the operation she was about to execute. Within hours of the Homeland Security briefing, Bondi had established a joint command center that brought together representatives from every major federal agency involved in protecting American infrastructure. The FBI's Strategic Information and Operations Center had been transformed into a war room where intelligence analysts, field agents, military liaisons, and Homeland Security specialists worked around the clock to coordinate the most complex domestic security operation in American history. The first major breakthrough came from an unexpected collaboration between the NSA and the Department of Energy. Dr. Rachel Martinez, a nuclear security specialist, had been analyzing suspicious activities at power generation facilities across the country when she discovered a pattern that sent chills through the intelligence community. Madam Attorney General, Dr. Martinez reported via secure video conference from the Department of Energy's Crisis Center, "We've identified Iranian operatives with access to control systems at 7 nuclear power facilities across the United States. These individuals have been systematically mapping safety protocols and emergency shutdown procedures." Bondi felt her blood run cold as she absorbed the implications. "Dr. Martinez, are you telling me that Iranian sleeper cells have the capability to potentially cause nuclear incidents?" "Not directly, ma'am. But they have detailed knowledge of safety systems and could potentially create situations that force emergency shutdowns of nuclear reactors, which would immediately cut power to millions of Americans and could create panic about nuclear safety. Even without causing actual nuclear incidents, they could trigger widespread fear and economic disruption." The revelation that Iranian operatives had infiltrated America's nuclear infrastructure added an entirely new dimension to the threat assessment. Deputy Attorney General James Mitchell immediately convened an emergency session with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to assess security protocols at all American nuclear facilities. Meanwhile, Special Agent Lisa Rodriguez from the FBI's Chicago field office had been conducting intensive surveillance on Reza Shahidi, a software engineer who worked for a major financial services company. What Rodriguez discovered would expand their understanding of the Iranian operation beyond physical infrastructure attacks. "Madam Attorney General," Rodriguez reported during the evening briefing, "Shahidi has been systematically accessing financial transaction systems for one of America's largest banks. We believe he has the capability to disrupt electronic payment systems that process over $200 billion in daily transactions." Bondi studied the surveillance reports with growing alarm. "Agent Rodriguez, are we looking at potential attacks on America's financial system in addition to physical infrastructure?" "Yes, ma'am. Our analysis indicates that Iranian operatives have positioned themselves within multiple sectors of the American economy. They could potentially coordinate physical attacks on infrastructure with cyber attacks on financial systems, creating economic chaos that could trigger widespread panic. The scope of the Iranian operation was becoming clearer, and it was far more comprehensive than anyone had initially imagined. These weren't simply terrorist attacks designed to cause casualties or destroy specific targets. This was a coordinated assault on the entire foundation of American civilization, designed to create systemic collapse across multiple critical sectors simultaneously. CIA Director Michael Harrison arrived at the Joint Command Center with additional intelligence that further expanded the threat assessment. Pam, we've intercepted communications suggesting that Iranian sleeper cells have been coordinating with organized crime networks to acquire explosives and weapons. This isn't just about sabotaging infrastructure systems, they may be planning armed attacks as well. The possibility that Iranian operatives were preparing for armed confrontations with American law enforcement added another layer of complexity to Operation Patriot Shield. Bondi immediately authorized the deployment of tactical response teams to support the arrest operations planned for the following day. Director Harrison, what's our assessment of their weapons capabilities? Bondi asked. Based on intercepted communications and surveillance, we believe multiple sleeper cells have acquired military-grade explosives and automatic weapons. Some operatives may have received combat training and could potentially engage in sustained firefights with law enforcement. The intelligence continued to flow in from field offices across the country, each report adding new details to the comprehensive picture of Iranian infiltration. From Seattle came reports of operatives working within the aerospace industry, potentially with access to sensitive information about military aircraft and missile defense systems. Los Angeles FBI agents had identified operatives within the entertainment industry who had been systematically gathering intelligence on American cultural and social vulnerabilities. Perhaps most concerning were reports from the East Coast, where Iranian operatives had apparently infiltrated several major shipping ports, potentially giving them the capability to disrupt international trade and smuggle additional weapons or personnel into the United States. Special Agent Michael Thompson from the Baltimore field office provided particularly disturbing intelligence during a late-night briefing call. Madam Attorney General, we've identified Iranian operatives working for the Port of Baltimore who have been systematically mapping container inspection procedures and customs protocols. We believe they may have been facilitating the entry of additional Iranian assets or weapon systems. Agent Thompson, are you suggesting that Iranian sleeper cells have been using American ports to smuggle in reinforcements or equipment? That's our assessment, ma'am. We've identified suspicious shipping patterns involving containers from Iran and Iranian allied countries that bypass normal inspection procedures. Some of these containers may have contained additional operatives, weapons, or specialized equipment for their planned attacks. Bondi realized that the Iranian operation was even more sophisticated than they had discovered. Not only had Iranian intelligence services positioned operatives throughout American society over a period of decades, but they had also established supply networks and reinforcement capabilities that could sustain extended operations against American targets. She immediately contacted President Trump to brief him on the latest intelligence developments. Mr. President, the Iranian operation is far more extensive than our initial assessment. We now have evidence that they've infiltrated our nuclear facilities, financial systems, ports, and aerospace industry. They appear to be preparing for coordinated attacks that could affect every aspect of American society. President Trump's response was immediate and decisive. Pam, I'm authorizing the use of military assets to support Operation Patriot Shield. I want Special Operations Command to coordinate with your teams to ensure we have overwhelming force available if these Iranian operatives attempt armed resistance. Mr. President, I'm also recommending that we implement emergency protocols for critical infrastructure protection. If Iranian operatives succeed in executing even a portion of their planned attacks, we need to be prepared for immediate response and recovery operations. Done. I'm also authorizing you to coordinate with our international allies. If Iran is conducting operations of this magnitude against American infrastructure, they may be planning similar attacks against other allied nations. The international dimension of the Iranian threat became clearer as intelligence agencies shared information with allies in NATO and other security partnerships. British intelligence reported suspicious activities by Iranian nationals in London, while Canadian authorities had identified potential Iranian operatives near critical infrastructure facilities in Toronto and Vancouver. The Iranian regime appeared to be executing a coordinated international campaign designed to simultaneously attack the infrastructure of multiple Western nations, potentially triggering global economic and political instability that could fundamentally alter the balance of international power. Back at the Joint Command Center, Bondi was coordinating final preparations for Operation Patriot Shield with military commanders and intelligence officials. General Patricia Williams from Special Operations Command had arrived to oversee military support for the operation. "Madam Attorney General," General Williams reported, "we have special operations teams positioned near all major target locations, ready to provide backup if Iranian operatives resist arrest or attempt to execute their attacks during our operations." General Williams, what's our assessment of potential casualties if Iranian operatives are better armed and trained than we expect? Ma'am, we're prepared for worst-case scenarios. Our teams have extensive experience in urban counter-terrorism operations, and we have medical and evacuation assets positioned to respond immediately if Iranian operatives engage in armed resistance. The final intelligence briefing before Operation Patriot Shield revealed the true scope of what American security forces were attempting. Over 3,000 federal agents, military personnel, and local law enforcement officers would be involved in simultaneous operations across 23 states. Every identified Iranian operative would be arrested or neutralized within a coordinated 2-hour window, while enhanced security protocols would be implemented to protect critical infrastructure nationwide. Dr. Sarah Chen from the NSA provided the final piece of intelligence that would guide the operation. "Madam Attorney General, we've successfully decrypted Iranian command and control communications. We now know the exact timing of their planned activation sequence and the specific targets they intend to attack." Dr. Chen, what's the timeline? Based on the decrypted communications, Iranian sleeper cells will receive their final activation orders at 800 Eastern Time tomorrow morning. They plan to execute coordinated attacks beginning at 1200 Eastern Time, targeting power grids, water systems, transportation networks, and financial systems simultaneously across the country. Bondi looked around the command center at the assembled intelligence officials, military commanders, and federal agents who would execute Operation Patriot Shield. "Ladies and gentlemen, we now know exactly when and how the Iranian operatives plan to attack American infrastructure. We will execute our operation at 0600 Eastern Time, 2 hours before they receive their activation orders." She paused, allowing the significance of the moment to sink in. "Tomorrow morning, we will conduct the largest simultaneous arrest operation in American history. We will demonstrate to the Iranian regime and any other hostile foreign actors that America will defend its homeland with overwhelming force and absolute determination." The room fell silent as everyone understood they were witnessing a pivotal moment in American history. The nation's top law enforcement official was about to execute an operation that would either prevent one of the most catastrophic attacks ever planned against the United States, or potentially trigger armed confrontations with enemy operatives embedded throughout American society. Standing in the command center, surrounded by maps, intelligence reports, and operational plans, Attorney General Pam Bondi felt the weight of protecting 330 million American lives. The Iranian sleeper cells had spent decades preparing for their moment of attack, but American Homeland Security forces were ready to meet that challenge with everything they had. Operation Patriot Shield would begin in less than 8 hours, marking a decisive moment in the defense of the American homeland. The Iranian operatives had revealed their plans, but they were about to discover that attacking America would provoke a response that would demonstrate the full power and determination of the world's greatest democracy.